Hello there, good evening, and welcome to the Aim2 Facebook Big Debate tonight. Thank you very much for joining us from all over the country, and I see that there's a great number of people having plugged into this debate. The reason why we're having this debate, and I wish we were having it on a better occasion, is because of the shocking mismanagement of this government of the COVID situation in this country. Just last weekend, the government stated that they were going to create 9 more weeks of lockdown, which is absolutely atrocious for this country. Lockdown and COVID have done enormous damage to this country over the last year. And it's just so frustrating that we are a year into this particular crisis, and yet the government are still focused on carrying on with lockdown. So what we're just going to discuss tonight is basically, one, how damaging lockdown is to the country. Two, we're going to look at the solutions that could take us out of here. And three, we're going to critique the government's actions so far. So first and foremost, Ireland has had the longest and most severe workplace restrictions in Europe. So Ireland, according to Reuters, has had 163 days of workplace closures. That's incredible. Germany, for example, has had 34 workplace closures in that period of time. So 163 days closed in Ireland, comparing to 34 days closed in Germany. So the length and the severity of COVID restrictions in Ireland is an outlier in European terms. The decisions that have been made by the government when it comes to lockdown and when it comes to COVID have been catastrophic in so many different ways. I was speaking to a consultant psychiatrist there very recently, and she told me that the number of young people who are presenting currently to hospital for acute mental health issues is up 130% since 2019. And one of the difficulties is that there's a radical increase in the number of people presenting for acute mental health issues. But at the same time, there's staff shortages in the hospitals, and there's a reduction of treatment for people with mental health. The mental health toll on this country is unparalleled, in my view. There's a feeling of heavy claustrophobia in many, many families across the country. And when people heard the news that the governments were looking to lock down this country for another 9 weeks, it met with exasperation on so many people's behalf. And this especially when we're looking at our near neighbour, Britain, who are miles ahead of us with regards inoculation of the population, and who are currently talking about lifting their restrictions very, very shortly. It does not make sense. And I think the comparison between how the north of Ireland and Scotland and Britain, etc., have tackled this issue just in recent months brings into sharp relief the incompetency of the Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil and Green government. One of the most frustrating aspects of this whole crisis for me is what's happened to our health service. So there are many people who have cancer, who have heart disease, who have stroke issues, who have mental health, who simply have had their access to healthcare radically shut down. So their diagnosis has been delayed, their treatment has been delayed, and as a result, they are presenting with far more advanced illnesses into hospitals around the country. And many of you might have heard during the week, a Limerick oncologist was on the radio, and he said that the country needed to prepare for an influx of serious cancer patients. He said that a large numbers of cancers that were presenting now were in advanced stages. So what does that mean? It means that, one, treatment is going to be far more invasive, far more costly, both in health terms and financial terms on the patient, and on financial terms on the state as well. And I don't believe that the costs of the government decisions in life and financially have properly been factored into their decision making over the last year at all. Aintu has been one of the few voices that have been calling for the protection of those key health services, especially cancer, especially heart disease, stroke, and mental health services. And we've been looking for those to be kept open in these very, very difficult times. One of the big issues for us as well, and aim to have been raising this in the Dáil, is the housing crisis in Ireland. So last year, 70 people died in homelessness in Dublin alone. We don't know what the figures are for the rest of the country because the government doesn't collect those figures, which is incredible. So there is an acute housing crisis. That housing crisis hasn't gone away. It may have been eclipsed by COVID in recent times, but it hasn't disappeared whatsoever. So we see, even in the middle of this crisis, house prices are actually increasing, rents are increasing, and access to homes are reducing. And every week that the home building industry is closed in this state, 800 houses do not get built. So the inability for a builder to work alone, potentially, or with one other person on a house to build a home for a family is leading to a further restriction of the supply of homes, which is causing major difficulty and death in this country. We know in economic terms, what's happened in the last year is absolutely horrendous. 500,000 people have been made unemployed by the decisions of this government. Hundreds of thousands of people have been pushed into poverty by the decisions of this government. And we also know that shops, hotels, restaurants are literally deciding not to reopen. I know of a hotel which now it is being left to the receiver to run. And the same with shops around the country. And sadly, there is the culture of what I call the squinting windows has increased. So some neighbors are looking at other neighbors and pointing the finger at them for the actions that they're taking at the moment, which is wrong. The PUP, which is obviously low, is being taxed. And many of the grants are being denied to businesses who don't pay rates because they don't have a building. It's reckoned that 20 billion euros of debt will be put on the national debt of this state this year, which will bring our national debt to about 250 billion euros, 47,000 euros per man, woman, and the child, one of the highest national debts of any country in the world. And someday that's going to have to be paid. And the problem about that is because we're robbing from future generations' ability to invest in housing, health, and education, because they will be paying interest and the capital of this national debt. And one of the major strategic failures of this government over the last while has their inability to use the proper tools necessary to reduce the incidence of this illness in the country. So they have put the full weight of fighting this illness on the shoulders of the Irish people, the full weight, which is a disgrace. So instead of getting simple things right, like protection of our airports, like efficient rollout of the vaccines, such as protecting the nursing homes, such as proper north-south cooperation and investing in hospital capacity, instead of getting those things correctly, the government have defaulted to lockdown. They have placed the weight of the battle on the shoulders of the Irish people. And it's infuriating. It's absolutely wrong what's happening. And the fact that we're looking for months, potentially more, of this needs to be called out in this occasion. Just in relation to travel, it's incredible. I sat in front of Leo Varadkar when he was Taoiseach back last March. Flights were coming over from northern Italy, which was, as a hot spot of this illness at the time. And I said to Leo, why don't you stop those flights coming to Ireland? And Leo said, because the ECDC, the European Centre for Disease Control, does not want us to do that. And I asked him, so what's their rationale for that decision? And he shrugged. I couldn't believe it. He said, I don't know what's the reason for that decision. And I was thinking, if there was a manager in a small business in Main Street, Ireland, at the moment, who was making a decision for their small business and didn't know the rationale for that decision, he or she would be gone. And yet we had the CEO, the leader of this country, making a decision on the basis of what he was being told to do by a foreign organization, and he didn't understand the rationale for it. It was absolutely mind-bending stuff. And here lies one of the problems of Ireland's handling of this issue. Ireland has, especially the establishment politicians of this country, have a cap-tipping instinct to the European establishment at all times on this. So they're likely to do the bidding of the Europeans on this rather than actually get it together. So Leo allowed for those flights to come over. Those people came over from northern Italy. The illness was seeded right through the country, and so began the situation. The same happened with Cheltenham. You know, we in Ain2 raised the issue of fruit pickers coming from all over Europe to pick fruit in Keelings and other places in the country. And again, the government shrugged and refused to protect people. So, you know, today, right, nearly a year since the first occasion, the government have decided to bring in some level of quarantine into our hotels. Now, you know, if you were to try to find a phrase that captured the government's journey to this particular piece of legislation, kicking and screaming would be the phrase that you would use. The government literally got to this situation kicking and screaming. I spoke to Minister Eamon Ryan, the Minister for Transport, the Green guy, before Christmas, and I said, you know, there's going to be tens of thousands of people traveling home for Christmas. It's human nature. It's going to happen. What are you doing to test people on arrival? And again, nothing was put into place. And at the same time, the government was saying, well, you know, foreign travel doesn't really make up a big issue when it comes to this particular illness. Today, 90% of COVID in this state is the British variant. 90% of people who have COVID currently have got it due to it being seeded by foreign travel. It's heartbreaking to see that. And you see, you know, a lockdown happening, you know, right across the travel and the hospitality sector in this state. You know, we can't have hotels. The government won't have lockdown hotels and restaurants and pubs and clubs because they wouldn't protect the airports. It has been Ain2's policy to try and keep this country open. It has been Ain2's policy to resist governments pushing the country into lockdown. But we've done that through logical steps and proposals around protecting the country and protecting health and protecting the health service as well. So today in Leinster House, they're finally discussing a situation where there's going to be some kind of protection with regards to the airports. However, we hear today that the Brazilian variant is now on the island of Ireland. And here's another thing. We have the executive in the north of Ireland, made up by Sinn Féin, the SDLP, the DUP, and UUP and the Alliance, and the southern government have refused to properly cooperate on a north-south basis. If any logic can, you know, make a case for all Ireland's cooperation, the COVID illness makes that case. And the fact that Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, the Greens, Sinn Féin, the SDLP, DUP, UUP, and Alliance have all refused to cooperate on an all-Ireland basis means now that we have another variant on the island of Ireland, which is very likely to make its way to this side of the border. I just want to talk about vaccines. Vaccines are obviously vaccines have saved hundreds of millions of lives throughout history. They're probably one of the most important medical steps forward, in that they have, you know, radically changed so many diseases such as polio that have previously ravaged generations of people. A vaccine obviously has been created, and my offices, I'll be honest with you, night and day are getting phone calls from different cohorts of Irish society saying, I want to take the vaccine. When can I take the vaccine? Why is it taking so long? Now, I know some of the people listening to this won't want to take the vaccine themselves, and that's fine. I don't think anybody should be forced to take the vaccine. We are opposed to mandatory vaccination. A vaccine should be taken on the basis of an adult making the decision for themselves on the best medical evidence that they can understand. It should be an individual's choice whether they or their family take it. But the truth of the matter is, logically, well over 70 or 80% of the population want to take that vaccine now. And the rollout of that vaccine has been unbelievably slow. If you look at to try to get an idea of how many people have been vaccinated in the first 2 months, it's equivalent to the population of Louth. One county have been fully inoculated so far this year. When the vaccine landed, it took the government 2 weeks to get the vaccine into the nursing homes. It was an incredible situation. We had a wave of deaths again in the nursing homes just before the vaccine was brought in to those nursing homes. At the time, mid-January, 10% of those vaccines were going to people in nursing homes. I was getting calls from people who were working in labs and in admin in the HSC, and they were saying that they were being calls to be given the vaccines. And yet, frontline workers and people in the most exposed, the most vulnerable situation weren't being given those vaccines. Today, I'm getting calls from student nurses who are not on placement for another couple of months, who have been given their first vaccine, who have just got a phone call to say that they're given their second first vaccine. Now, I know, I'll say that again because it sounds nuts. Student nurses, young people, who are not in placement for another couple of months, who have already got their first vaccine. They feel guilty. They don't want to really have taken it before, cohorts that are more vulnerable. But they're getting a call to have their first vaccine. It doesn't make sense whatsoever. I have a doctor's surgeries calling me that at the same time that they have no confirmation of when they're going to get a vaccine for their over 85 cohort. A place that has vaccines but no needles in contact again today. So major confusion happening here. While millions are vaccinated in Britain, Scotland, and the North, a very small number of people are fully inoculated here. Indeed, Scotland is vaccinating 10 times faster currently than this state. Now, the government will say, we're going to ramp it up big style in the next couple of months. Everything is on a horizon, but when you get to the horizon, you realize you're in the same situation of ineffectual rollout. And, it's incredible. Again, another issue around the European Union. This government did not seek to procure vaccines in addition to the European supply chain. So in other words, when Denmark had enough cop on, when Germany had enough cop on to also seek different supplies for vaccines, the Irish government didn't do it. So as a result, that's going to radically elongate the length of time that this government will force the country into lockdown. It's an absolutely incredible situation. One of the things I want to say is about AIM2's approach to this as well is that we believe that the political establishment are actually massively divorced from the realities that people are in at the moment. And one of the bills that we in AIM2 brought forward there just a couple of weeks ago was a bill to cut TD's wages by 25%. Our attitude is this, you hear the political establishment just shower the country with platitudes on a regular basis, saying that we're all in this together, or clapping their hands for frontline workers. Yet they have been refusing to pay student nurses who are on the front line in this situation, and they have refused to take a pay cut like most people have in this country. You see people like Simon Harris, give plaudits on Twitter to the New Zealand government, and yet when it comes to following the New Zealand government and maybe taking a pay cut, they keep their heads down. We put a bill in there to reduce TD's salary by 25% because we also wanted to focus the mind of the political establishment. So tell you something, there would not be the same amount of lockdowns in this country had the political establishment taken the same level of economic pain as many people in Irish society. The political establishment would have got the basic stuff right from the start if they knew the economic pain that people were achieving left, right, and centre across the country. So that particular bill has passed first stage. It hasn't made me a popular TD, I can tell you that, in Leinster House. But we're going to see, can we still push that bill any way we can in Leinster House. I want to obviously there's people who are sending messages through here, and I'm going to try to get to some of those messages at the moment. Vitamin D obviously is a natural vitamin that people could and should be taking in this time. I'm taking vitamin D for two reasons. One, because I had a big cancer scare at the start of this year. You might see there's a little bit of a bandage on my head there still, because the doctor still likes to take little bits off my head every time I go to see him, unfortunately. But vitamin D is also very good in relation to tackling COVID, making people feel stronger and people feel healthier as well. We've put in questions around different medicines to the minister to see, can we get the minister to ramp up the level of care that's given to people with COVID around the country. We've also been at the fore of trying to push for student nurses to get properly paid in this particular time. But the big question, I think, that's hanging over people's head like the sword of Damocles is, how do we get out of this situation? It is intolerable that Ireland is an outlier in European terms with regards to the length of time we've been locked down and the severity of that lockdown. And we in Aintu are phenomenally frustrated, like so many people around the country, at the absolute inability of the government to get the simple things right. One of the major problems I have is that Aintu are nearly a sole voice in this battle. If you listen to the other opposition parties, first of all, Sinn Féin have been sitting on the fence in many ways on these issues. The Soc Dems, the Labour Party, and people before profits are actually calling for a zero COVID policy. Now, I love a zero COVID policy, but I'm absolutely living in the real world. And I realize that actually a zero COVID policy in its implementation would actually mean a longer lockdown than the government is proposing at the moment. Because it would mean that you would have to get the numbers of cases down to literally zero and make sure that it's completely deleted from society. And I honestly don't think that's practical, unfortunately. I don't think it's an opportunity that we're going to be able to do. It would mean, I think, and I've done some maths on this, a doubling of the length of lockdown that's necessary in the country. So we in Aintu we're going to remain the voice of the people with regards to this. We're going to fight for small businesses, and we're going to fight for workers. We're going to fight for people who need homes. We're going to fight for people who need medical treatment and health treatment to make sure that they can get that as well. We want to see people kept safe. We want to see numbers of this illness reduced. We want to see pressure taken off our health service. But we want to do it in a logical way that doesn't put the weight of this war on the shoulders of the people. We want to see Ireland get back to normal and hope be brought onto the horizon. We are a young party. We're only 2 years old at this moment in time, but we're growing at a fierce speed across the country. We have local area reps who are working at grassroots level on issues of bread and butter importance to people, and that can be seen in the polls. 2 years ago, the political establishment said that we could not build a new political movement in the country, and already in some of the polls, Aintu is coming in at about 4% in those polls. So what I would encourage you, if you feel that your voice has not been represented by the political establishment in any ways, if you want to see Aintu grow from strength to strength, if you want to see your desire for normality to return and the illness to be reduced and for people's health to be protected, I would ask you to go onto our website, aintu.ie, click on the membership button and sign up to Aintu today. We'll get our local organisers to get in contact with you, we'll plug you into the organisation, and we will continue to build. So that's all we have for you today. We'll try to give you updates on a weekly basis if we can on this. Like our Facebook page, we put up videos every day on this. Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock in Leinster House, I will be making the case to the Minister for Health on this particular issue. I will be saying to him what I'm saying to you. And I will say this, the Minister for Health has been a massive disappointment with regards his handling of this issue. The Minister, for me, comes across detached. He doesn't, it seems like he is a passenger on a train that's going in the wrong direction. I don't believe there's enough political oversight currently into the decisions that the government is making. There needs to be more political oversight and more pressure, and we in Aontú will bring about that pressure into the future. I won't hold you any longer. Gurnav Mila Mahagwif, us Chapter Stock in you, Hun Eishtag Lumsa, Bergi Bua, Agus Baime, a kind lat